Welcome to Mental Health Matters podcast with Seamus Corry. This episode includes in-depth discussions on topics surrounding mental health, including experiences with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and feelings of despair. We recognize that these subjects may be sensitive to some of you, our listeners, and we encourage you to take good self-care. Please listen at your own pace and don't hesitate to pause or seek support if needed. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Mental Health Matters, Real Stories, Real Recovery. My name is Seamus Corry. I'm a mental health practitioner and wellbeing consultant, and it's great to have you along here this afternoon. If you've not already subscribed or followed my channel both on YouTube and Spotify, please do so because you won't want to miss out on this amazing episode this afternoon. My guest this afternoon is a father, son, CEO and founder of an amazing counselling service called S.M.I.L.E Counselling. And I'd like to welcome today to Mental Health Matters, Declan Harrigan. Declan, you're very welcome to this podcast this afternoon. It's nice to have you. How does Friday take you at the moment, Declan?
It's going very well, Seamus. Thanks for having me on. Delighted to join you. I've been a follower of yours for a while, so I'm looking forward to the episode.
My brother, I stand on the shoulder of giants, having taken back control and taking a shot on your own podcast as well, which is equally amazing. So I stand on the shoulder of giants this afternoon.
Thank you.
And if I'm half as good as your podcast is, mate, I'll be doing well. I'll be doing well.
You're too kind. You're too kind. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm giving it to you, so just take it, right?
I'll take it. I'll take it gracefully.
So, Declan, for those who don't know you, as I've got to know you a little bit through initially connecting on LinkedIn, the power of LinkedIn, right? The power of LinkedIn is absolutely incredible. I feel as if I've known you forever as my brother from another mother.
Yeah.
And we have much to discuss. But for those who don't know you, and for those who don't know your story, tell the listeners and those who might be tuning in this afternoon a little bit about who Declan Harrigan is.
Yeah. So just a bit about me. I am, like you said, first and foremost, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son. I am the founder and chief exec of S.M.I.L.E Counselling, and moved to Scotland in 2011, I want to say. But things have really taken off here. I've been working in mental health for more years than I care to count up because it'll give away my age, Seamus. I know I look 21, so I'm going to stick with that. So
hold on to that one, my boy.
I'll hold on to that, and I love the lie. But I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate specifically about young people's mental health. So S.M.I.L.E Counselling I set up in 2015, and it was purely as a response to probably like most charities or social enterprises. They're mostly born out of frustration in an absence of something that doesn't exist. So you create something that maybe should have been there in the first place, but if it isn't, then you create that in the image that hopefully it makes a change. And my vision for S.M.I.L.E was that it would, even if it helped one person, that it was worth it. And where it was born from, when I moved to Scotland, I worked for one of the big charities, who I'll not name. They were a great organisation. And then I was asked by the local authority to come and work with them in what was called their Working with Young People team. And I had a lot of experience in working with young people as I was already a therapist when I moved here. I'd done a lot of kind of youth work and stuff that I'd done back home in the north of Ireland. And but it quickly became evident that I was getting the job that nobody wanted. So first team meeting, I was applauded almost as I walked in. I felt like a legend. And it was basically because nobody wanted to work with these young people. And it was so sad that you had these 16 to 24-year-olds who, for one reason or another, they probably had all of the aces that you can imagine. So adverse childhood experiences through childhood trauma, through addiction, through homelessness, through And my job was to work with them to get them into what was classed as positive destinations. So that could have been getting into training, getting into college, getting into volunteering, whatever. And a lot of them are basically written off, Seamus, if I'm going to be honest with you. I loved working with them. Every single one of them had so much potential, so much passion, but they just weren't being heard. They were young people who maybe behaved in a certain way at school and they were excluded because of different things that were happening in their lives, but that wasn't seen past the behavior. And I'm a big advocate for not just in therapy, but in life. We need to look at the person behind the behavior and not the behavior itself. It's so important that if we're focusing on the behavior, we're not seeing what's behind that. And a lot of these were just scared, vulnerable kids, who just needed somebody to take a punt on them and give them a chance. But the one constant and consistent thing about all these young people is they were all waiting on mental health services. They were all waiting for CAMS. They were all waiting for somebody to offer them mental health support. So at that time, I went to my boss in the local authority and said, look, I'm not asking for a pay raise. I'm not asking for anything else, but I'm a qualified psychotherapist. Rather than letting things escalate with these young people to the point of crisis, allow me to work with them. I'm not saying I've got a magic wand, but I can give them time, I can give them space, and I can use some of the skills that I have to de-escalate some of the things that are happening for them in their lives. And the answer at the time was, look, just get on with your job. We have 31 million deficit that we're trying to claw back. So, and it just wound me right up, if I'm honest. It was that part. Is this where we are? The value that we're placing on children and young people's lives. These are the next generation, and we're almost kind of saying, right, well, because what will happen is they're 16, they're probably on a waiting list for 2 years for CAMS. They had 18 and then they go into adult services and then they go to the bottom of the list again. So they're probably on a list for about 4 years before they're seen. And there's this misconception, and I'm not slating any services. I know CAMS is amazing what they do. Lots of NHS services are what they do, but they're oversubscribed, they're under pressure, and they're buckling. And what's happening is that people are going in and they're going in with this pretense that if I get into CAMS or if I get into the adult services, everything will be fine. And it's just not true.
Yeah.
They do not have a magic wand and they only have limited sessions they can offer. So I suppose that's the part where, the frustration was there, the anger was there. And I was very conscious of my emotions at the time and how I was feeling, but I allowed it to fuel it and channel into something positive. And what I done was I volunteered, I spoke to my wife and said, look, here's where I'm at. And she's, to be amazing. I mean, to be honest, she's amazing. She has so much patience, I have to say. She has the patience of a saint, when it comes to me. But she knew that there was something in my that this had to happen. So I says, look, I'll volunteer one evening a week and maybe a Saturday morning to see one or two young people. And if I can help them, great. But if I can't, then at least the option has been there. And that's where S.M.I.L.E was born. And S.M.I.L.E is an acronym, so it stands for, and I was very conscious of the work I was doing. So it stands for support, motivate, inspire, lead to self-determination, and empowerment. And that's the journey that I wanted to take young people on from the moment of coming in for support and then ultimately to leave empowered and resilient within themselves.
Wow. What a journey, Declan. What a Declan. And again, like you say, born out a sense of frustration with where services are at constantly. And that was back when, in 2015, right?
Yeah. Nearly 10 years ago.
Nearly 10 years ago. Has it got worse, in your opinion, in that intervening 10 years?
I think, sadly, I think it has. I think, well, there's kind of almost been that imperfect storm that happened in the last 10 years, and into the mix we've had COVID and the impact that has had on young people and their social isolation and their social energy to be able to engage with people and certain ages and stages of children who were born during the COVID period as well. So I don't think we've actually seen the full impact that COVID has had, not only on the adults that lived through it, but the children and young people who've lived through it, and what a hugely globalized and traumatic event that they've experienced. You know, if we were to look at it on a grand scale, the whole world was going through trauma at the same time.
Yeah.
And these young people were here. I mean, we hear with clients and young people who were coming in just after that a lot of the concerns that they had sometimes wasn't theirs. They were worried about their parents, because what they were hearing at home was, you know, first we had COVID, then we had an energy crisis and the cost of living crisis, and what the kids were hearing was, they're hearing their parents downstairs or wherever, how are we going to afford to pay for the car? How are we going to afford to send them to the school trip? How are we going to afford? So kids were getting adult anxiety about things that they couldn't control, and they couldn't speak to their parents because they were thinking, well, I don't want to speak to them because they're already stressed enough. So what do I do with this? And what happens is it just created that tornado inside them. And sadly, I think it is getting more and more difficult for young people. And I'm just thankful that we're here at the moment to offer that service in the area that we are.
Absolutely. So how does your service operate then? How can somebody gain access to your service, and what can they expect?
So if they're from the area, so I'm based in West Lothian in Scotland, so it's kind of, I describe it like the buckle of the belt, the central belt. So I'm smack dab in the middle between Edinburgh and Glasgow. When I said S.M.I.L.E, I wanted it to be very person focused and young person focused. So the idea was that, you know, we don't just accept referrals from GPs. We don't just accept referrals from teachers or parents. We actually encourage self-referrals to come from children, from young people. And if they're under 16 and if their parents referring them, then they sit with the child and write the referral. You know, and in my very early days in S.M.I.L.E, and there was a naivety to me that I was taking referrals and parents were sending referrals because I had parents down the phone crying in turmoil because they just didn't know how to support their own child because they were self-harming and all these different things. And you kind of get to that point, you know, they're sending referrals for your child and hope and desperation. But then you had children coming in or young people and saying, I don't know why I'm here. Like my mom just picked me up and brought me here, and I don't even know who you are or what I'm here to do. So it became very clear that we had to encourage parents and caregivers and workers to sit with the young person and child and write the referral form if they couldn't write it themselves. Because we made it clear, look, there's total transparency for children and young people here. So when they come in, we will read the referral form out to them, we will read what you've written, and they have to understand why they're here. There's absolutely no point in bringing someone to therapy and asking them to really unload a lot of their innermost secrets if they're not ready, you know, and that goes for adults as well. So whenever, thankfully now we don't have a waiting list. We've opened up our waiting list and we don't intend to hopefully close it. You can refer online directly. There's a refer button. After that, you'll be contacted by our team and you'll be allocated a therapist, and you'll be seen pretty quickly. We're talking within a few weeks at the most. So, and you're offered up to 12 sessions at any given time. It used to be that we offered open-ended sessions again in the image of idealism at the beginning. I thought, right, I want it to be free, I want it to be open-ended, you know, all of these things. And ideally that is how it would work. But what we found was at the time, whenever people came on and they were beginning to get therapy and it was open-ended, it was great for them while they were on, but who it wasn't great for was the people who were waiting to come behind them.
Yeah.
So if people were phoning and saying, well, when will you have a space? Well, I actually don't know. I don't know when these people are going to be done. So we had to kind of formulate it a wee bit so that we can say to people, look, there'll be a space in 3 weeks' time, you know, we could manage that and see more clients, you know. And it worked out because we changed that model 2 years ago to the 12 sessions, because over the previous 7 years, we had done a lot of research and looked at all our stats, and the average amount of sessions that were coming out that people were attending was 9.4
Wow.
hours. So we knew that if we gave 12, it would give room for people maybe to be off sick or maybe need that wee extra bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And without breaching confidentiality in terms of the sessions themselves, what kind of issues are you coming up against, Declan, in terms of what are young people facing out there at the moment, and what are they carrying?
There's a wide range of things, Seamus, that's coming up at the moment. It has varied over the years, but we've always had self-harm and suicide quite high up in the list of presenting issues. We
Mm,
talk about presenting issues and then clinical diagnosis, because what tends to happen is people will present with something, but it's usually either something that they're comfortable presenting with or something that is socially acceptable to present with, like depression and anxiety. And then they come in and you realize actually this is not anxiety. It's, why are you anxious? Well, I'm anxious because I'm getting bullied, because I'm at school. So relationships is a big thing, family relationships and school relationships, um, self-harm and suicidal thoughts and ideation, and various levels of trauma as well. So we work with everything. There's not a point where we think that's too difficult of an issue that we present with, because we have different levels and skill sets of therapists that we have on the team. So if it is a more severe presenting issue, then we will bring in one of our more skilled therapists to work with that.
yeah, you mentioned your team there, Declan, and do you have do you have a team that's just solely based in Scotland, or is your service open to a wider UK audience?
At the moment in S.M.I.L.E, it's only based in Scotland. So um, we did look at online stuff during COVID, and we did use those types of things, but a lot of the funding that we get is purely based in Scotland at the moment. But anybody who knows me knows that I always think big. So
Yeah,
my vision and aspiration would be to have a smile, certainly in all of the nations, in UK and Ireland. So that is my goal, to have a smile counselling and training in Ireland, England, Wales, and north and south of Ireland as well.
absolutely. There is, I would say, in terms of my considered opinion, I'm by no means clinical in terms of operation. It's more well-being consultancy and well-being mentoring advice. But I would say there's a desperate need. There is a desperate need for a smile service in every one of the territories, if not in every major town in this fair land,
Yeah.
because people are waiting. They are struggling. People are losing hope, and in some cases, sadly, losing their lives as well
Yeah.
while they wait for treatment. You'll be keenly aware of the most recent suicide numbers that have come up, and you won't be surprised at all to hear that. Again, it's increased by 6% on the last record, and that's just the figures that we know about.
Aye, aye, and that's exactly it, and that's a good point, Seamus. It's just the numbers that we know about. We know. I'm also an assist trainer, so assist I
Mm,
mean, it's widely known, it's internationally recognised, and it's trained over 2 million people across the globe in the last 40 years around suicide intervention. And what we know, through that knowledge and research and work that's done through assist, is that 1 in 20 people is thinking about suicide at any given time.
yeah,
And if we think about that for a minute and think about the people in our lives, the people, if we walk into a shopping centre and if we would look at that stat, 5% of the people in the volume of the world
mm,
is thinking about suicide.
yeah,
Now, then what we don't take into account then is that the people who don't tell us that they're thinking about suicide and they're thinking about it anyway, the people who maybe act on the thoughts and create behaviors. So when we start seeing those and trying to gauge the stats of how things are recorded as well. So car accidents, for example, was it a car accident or was it a suicide?
Yeah.
We don't know. So there's things there, and unless we know the answer, and the person can reply to that answer during that event, then we just can't. So I think suicide thoughts and ideation is much higher than
100%.
we know.
100%, and I would fully, totally agree with you. And one of the big issues, which has always been the case, and you and I have both grown up in Ireland, the suicide, there was a massive stigma to anybody who took their own life through suicide, and I know it is the case, and it remains the case that for a lot of insurance companies won't, if somebody had a life insurance policy, they won't pay out if somebody is taking their own life, right?
Yeah.
So the wording on the death certificate will be, you know, um, creatively altered to ensure that loved ones who are left behind aren't, significantly amiss as a result of, somebody who has taken their own life financially. And so the numbers, certainly the numbers are far higher. I think certainly, again, from my research and the reading that I've done, certainly the level of mental health issue that's out there at the moment, post-pandemic, post cost of living crisis, and I will say post, significant underinvestment, by various governments over the last 14 years, particularly the Conservative government here in the UK, have led to a situation and a real crisis in mental health. And Declan, from your experience, would you say that we are at crisis level?
I think certainly um, we could consider it a crisis at this point because of all of the stuff that we talked about, in that perfect storm with COVID, and I think that what's good is I tend to talk about young people, but people in general are more comfortable about talking about their mental health. Doesn't mean it never existed before.
Yeah.
It just means that now we've actually given permission and a voice to talk about, mental health and challenges, and it's accepted. But there's still a stigma around it, whether we want to believe that or not. There is still a stigma. There's still a judgment. There's still a shame around mental health with certain people, certain cultures. I mean, for example, we talked about suicide there. There was one community in the world who had astronomical suicide rates because they didn't have a word for suicide in their language, and that was the Aboriginals in Australia. And until they were given a word to understand what it was, then it was just something that was happening and it was seen as okay. So sometimes it is about reframing language and how do we understand things. But I think we're certainly in crisis, and I think if we don't do probably what I would say that needs to be done at the moment is going back the ways and doing early intervention in nurseries and primaries, and getting young people and children to understand what mental health is. So it could be talking about mental fitness and mental well-being and all the stuff that you and I talk about, but doing that at a really early age, and integrating parent workshops into that as well. There's so much work to be done. I mean, my aim for S.M.I.L.E is to shut it down. That's the ironic part. I want to. It's the weirdest business model people have ever heard.
Yeah.
You've got a successful organization. My aim year on year is to shut this place.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be shut anytime soon, I don't think.
Which brings me beautifully to my next question, because you're not only a father, a son, and a CEO of S.M.I.L.E Counseling, you're also an author, Declan Harrigan.
I am indeed.
And which brings me beautifully to this beautiful book, which just came through my door this afternoon, called My Monster,
Mhm.
which has been beautifully created, beautifully published, and beautifully illustrated. Do you want to tell us a little bit about My Monster and where that came from?
Yeah. I so it was quite a strange experience. I think part of that setup of Smile was it was trying to educate young people specifically around what counselling was, because they're so used to seeing counselling on TV and in the movies. They think that they're going to come in and there's this old guy with a beard and leather elbow pads and they have to lie on the couch and get psychoanalyzed.
Hey, have you been to my therapy sessions?
Oh, and that's genuinely what people think. So it was so funny, you're talking to kids and they're like you're coming in and this kind of dazed and confused look, um, which kind of stopped them from coming as well because there was that anxiety around it and what they knew from media. So my monster was there to demystify counselling for children specifically. So the reason I called it my monster, it's actually the words from one of my younger clients. The youngest client I've worked with was 5,
Wow.
but I worked with an 8-year-old at one point, and I was speaking to him, and I mean we were colouring in and stuff and drawing things, and which was part of the therapy, and what he was drawing was like I asked him to draw something that described his feelings, and what it was like, and he drew this really dark monster with the horns and all that kind of stuff, and it was almost like a red stuff in the stomach whirling around. And then I asked him to explain it, and he says the only way, basically the only way he could describe the feeling was it's like a monster. It's like a big shadow over me all the time, and it doesn't go away. So that's what it feels like. I feel like I'm being followed by a monster, and I can feel it. Um, and that's where the title of the book came, My Monster. And the book illustrated amazingly by Jake Bugden. He's a phenomenal illustrator. And I wrote this as part of a way to try and encourage young people to look at it. And if they can't read, for example, you could look at the pictures and it will tell you the story without having to follow the words. It's non-gender specific. And when we talk about the monster in the book, we don't actually hear what the monster is. So when the young child is going through and they're talking about things that are happening for them, and it talks about something happened, that interpretation is left up to the reader to decide what that something is. So whatever child is reading this book, they will identify their own monster within the book. And the hope is that as they go on in the book and they begin to read it, that they see that the more that they started to introduce and talk to people and ask for help, more colour is introduced into the book because it starts in black and white. And then whenever they come for therapy, the monster starts to get smaller and smaller to a point where the child can then control the monster. And it's not a big dark shadow anymore. It's a small kind of colourful toy, like an action figure kind of size, which you see at the end of the book. But what the message in the book is that you don't really lose your monster because it has been there, it has existed, it can't unexist. But what you can do is take control of it, and rather than it overshadow you, you can hold it in the palm of your hand, and you're there to control it rather than it control you in the end.
Can I ask the $64,000 million question then, Declan?
Yeah, I'm still poor.
No, not that one. That was going to be my second one. The first one I want to ask you though is that the secret to recovery?
To understand that it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
I think so. I think one of the secrets is the acceptance that it has happened and it isn't always going to go away permanently. It will be there. And it's how we acknowledge and accept that to be able to move forward. Weirdly, I was working with a client yesterday and we were talking about this, and we talked about the stagnation, when we stop and we're so still that if we don't plan for the future and if we're so stuck in the feelings that we've got, You're always seeing the things that have happened in your rear view mirror. You know, we use a car as an image. You know, I says, imagine you're in a car and the car stops. You've stopped the car, you've put the brakes on, you've pulled the handbrake up, and everything that's happened to you is still there behind you in your rear view mirror. Right. So until you're willing to accept that you've had to drive through that to get to here, you then have to plan the journey for the next part. Otherwise, you will be stuck and you will constantly be consumed by what you can see behind you. But there has to be a level of acceptance that it doesn't always or ever fully go away.
Yeah. Oh, powerful words, Declan. Powerful words spoken. You know, from somebody who's been there, done that, and you know, works with clients as young as 5 on the ground at the moment to support them to deal with their own monsters in life. And you know, there is learning there for both children and young people, but I presume adults as well who will maybe have been through the system, have fallen through the system, have not received the treatment and support that's required, and still to this day carry their monster around with them.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll know the same as me. We all have our monsters, you know, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. I think the misconception is that when we hear the word monster, we think of the worst case scenario. You know, if it's, you know, childhood trauma or abuse or suicide. But a monster can be that you can't get out of debt.
Yeah.
You know, that you can't pay your bills, that you're struggling to get up out of bed in the morning. Everybody's monster is different and unique, and we have to respect the monster that everybody has. It doesn't make it any less of a monster because of what it is or what it does to you. The important part is that if you acknowledge that you have a monster first and foremost, and what do you do then to start making that smaller? You know, whatever that is, if it's, you know, being more active, socializing more, usually it's going outside your comfort zone and doing something you wouldn't ordinarily do. And when you start to do those things, and if it's going to the GP or therapy, then you do start to take control that wee bit more. And monsters don't like that because they want to be in control. So the more we can acknowledge that the monster exists, and first and foremost, and what do we need to do to starve this monster to make it smaller? You know, don't keep feeding it your anxiety. Don't keep feeding it your fears. You know, take control. Be confident in the fact that if you're making a choice that is positive for you, that is enough to move forward. And the book it's really helpful. The feedback that I've had, it's been really helpful for parents. They kind of recognize their own monster in it, but also when they're reading it with their children, and I speak to parents about this in workshops about if you read the book, when you get to the point whenever they're asking about, you know, that something happened to the child, turn into the child you're reading it to and say, what do you think that was? What do you think it is? The child would unconsciously tell you what's happening for them because it's all they know.
Yeah.
So the child might say, well, I think they're getting bullied, or I think they're really sad because their daddy works away all the time, or I think they're really sad because, and that is a window and an opportunity to hear the voice of the child in the truest, purest form. And then you know what you have to do to support that child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Declan, thank you so much for your beautiful words this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast this afternoon, and sharing your work, sharing the amazing work that you do. You know, and I think you kind of shared with me one time that we spoke how many clients have are you currently supporting, or how many clients have passed through your door since 2015? Declan?
Yeah, so we've supported over 2,000 clients now, and we've come through the doors and been brave enough to step over that threshold. And we work with 120 clients a week now. So we've hit our kind of highest threshold, and the aim is to continue to do that. You know, we want to have a smile. Everybody deserves a smile, in the two senses of the word. a smile physically, to be able to actually feel a smile,
Absolutely.
but also to actually have a presence of a smile counselling in their area to access that smile.
Well, anything I can do, Declan, to further the development of Smile Counselling here in the Northwest, I'm more than happy to act as your ambassador to go before you in terms of brand awareness and speak what needs to be spoken to the powers that be so that your objective can come to fruition in terms of the establishment of a smile counselling service on every territory in this fair land of ours. Um,
Absolutely.
where can where can people reach out and find your service, Declan?
So just because you can't access the counselling if you're not from the area, we have lots of resources on the website. So if you go on the website, it's just www.smilecounselling.org.uk. On there, there's lots of videos, there's lots of apps that will give you advice and guidance of what you can use for certain issues that you're working through. So there's lots of stuff there to work you through that resilience and preparation until you get support as well. And to access myself, you'll know this, you can probably find me mostly on the LinkedIn. And so
Absolutely.
anybody who wants to find out anything more, they can hit connect, and I'm quite happy to connect with people and do what we can for the benefit of the people we work with.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful. Where can people find your book, Declan?
It's available on Amazon, so if you just type in My Monster, hopefully it should come up, or you type my name in, and it'll come up. And there's lots of reviews there and stuff as well. So don't take my word for it. Read other people's
Wonderful.
reviews on that as well.
Wonderful, and I'll also read it. I'll leave my own review, and I'll also put the book in terms of my own resource section on my own website, so people can grab it there as well, Declan. And
Fantastic.
I hope to reach that second question that I was going to ask you in terms of yes, you're still poor, and I recognise that. But you know, children's books are where things are at the moment, Declan. So I hope through that awareness, people reach out and get this beautiful book, buy it and use it to support. I will also say that if you've been affected by any of the issues raised or spoken about in today's issue, there is signposting and support to other organisations or help that you might feel will help you or support you, not only in terms of Smile counselling, but also other services that are accessible for you once you hear this episode. Declan, thank you ever so much, as I say, for coming on today and making my Friday. It's been wonderful to have you. It's wonderful to shine a light on Smile Counselling and the amazing work that you've done and continue to do with so many people across the length and breadth of Scotland and the Central Belt. I wish you well in terms of your future work, and for you and your team. My thoughts, aspirations, and prayers go with you because I know it must be a difficult ground you walk upon at the moment, working in the field as we do. But, you must be sustained in feeling that you've supported so many people to a positive recovery. And hopefully through that action, in some way stem the tide of mental health crisis that people are experiencing in this country. So I wish you well, Declan. I wish you and your team well. Thank you for coming on Mental Health Matters. I've been Seamus Corry, and you've been Declan Harrigan, and thanks for being here this afternoon, my friend.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Seamus. Thanks for having me.
No worries. No worries.